Welcome, everybody. This is Bart Sharp, and you are on Becoming Quantum Conscious at United Public Radio and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 105.3, broadcasting out of the beautiful city of New Orleans, Louisiana. But if you're in France, you would say Nouvelle Orleans. I'm so proud that I think I got that right. Uh, France is always so much fun to speak. But today we have Perdita Finn and Clark Strand, both authors of different books. They're both married, soulmates, I'd have to say, something like that. They might go, "Oh God, don't use that passe word."
Oh no, that's the word we use.
That's the word you use. But and yes, so Clark is the author of Waking Up to the Dark, and Perdita is author to Taking Back the Magic, which they both been on the show with these books. It's just great interviews, great books. And a book that is also super important that is, once you read it, it kind of gives you an itch to keep thinking about it and curiosity about it. And the name of this book is The Way of the Rose, which is focusing on the Rosary. And and if I've read it, I was going to go, what am I doing this for? Because this is like for people that are like, bookkeepers or something that aren't, or, like almost nuns, but they're not exactly. And they have their rosaries around and they're doing their beads and stuff and such. And I just tease with that because I do have a lot of respect for all forms of meditation. However, this book really takes you down to the core of what the Rosary is, with great personal stories of how these two have lived it, become it, used it.
Bart, one thing I just want to say, and I think it's really important, is the book's about the Rosary, but it's not a book about Catholicism or even Christianity. And we're not Catholic, and we're not advocating that anyone become Catholic or Christian or join a religious group. We're really interested in the Rosary as a bead practice that's older than religion, older than civilization, old as us, and why it's it's gotten that fuddy-duddy reputation, right? It really has the Rosary, but in fact, it's a really subversive, radical, feminist spiritual tradition.
Yeah, I tell you, we probably did it at Burning Man. Yeah,
exactly.
I was at one of our Way of the Rose meetings recently where we prayed the Rosary together for our heart's desire. And one person said to a new member, "This is not your grandmother's Rosary." And then another person said, "No, it is your grandmother's Rosary, but your grandmother's Rosary was never anything like you imagined it to be. It had all kinds of secrets hidden within it."
Yeah, secrets is a big word for this.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's amazing about the Rosary is, as Clark and I began to investigate its history and its traditions, you realize it's been a place where a lot of pagan practices got hidden from Catholicism.
Yeah.
And it's probably the most direct line back to those old goddess devotion mystery cults of the Mediterranean than anything else. You're talking, it's May, and everyone probably has a tradition of hearing about May flowers and the crowning of the lady with flowers in May. And a lot of people who did go to Catholic school probably made rose crowns and put them on the Virgin Mary at this time of year. That's one of the oldest spiritual traditions in the world.
Before the rose was sacred to Mary, it was sacred to Isis, and before Isis, it was sacred to Inanna. And before that, we really, bottom out in deep history. We have no idea how far back this tradition of weaving rose crowns in the springtime to celebrate the goddess really is. It could date all the way back to the Paleolithic.
Yes, and what do you think those people were doing way back then? What any ideas of what their intentions were?
Well, it's an interesting thought. The statues that they had back then, because these were hunter-gatherer people, so the statues themselves were quite small. They were those little Paleolithic goddess figurines that they made and were meant to be held and transported from place to place. It wasn't until people settled down and began to build temples that you find life-size statues that you could, crown with a garland of roses. So one theory is that they made them for one another, that they crowned one
Hmm.
another with them.
They recognize, the goddess within each and every one of them.
Yes. And as you made these flowers, a little bit of you was being transmitted with that, as well
Yeah,
as the goddess.
A
And you were,
friend of ours in Way of the Rose is writing a book about the history of human beings and flowers right now. It's an extraordinary book. I will send you a copy of it when it gets published. But roses, people have been devoted to roses as long as we've been people. And there's something about wild roses have 5 petals, just like the 5 fingers of our hand. And
hmm,
and flowers have taught us how to be human beings. That in a certain sense, they've taught us about beauty, they've taught us about love, they've taught us about devotion. And the flowers themselves call, we know it. It's so ubiquitous, and we've forgotten, this time of year when the whole world is in bloom, you just feel so happy, right?
yes, it is true. And in France, we eat them on our salads. Uh,
We do too here.
yeah, yeah, and it's such a wonderful thought. And when you're talking about five-sided, you're also talking about Venus
yeah,
and that lovely complexity of the goddess of Venus.
yeah,
And I think of the statue, the big woman, you know, not the beautiful she. I'm your Venus, I'm your power of your desire type of thing. But she holds everything. She
yeah,
is everything.
yeah,
Great
And
mother, you know.
indeed.
yeah. So it's interesting to think about how this got connected to the Rosary. The name Rosary goes back to Rosalia, which was a feast for the dead that was celebrated in ancient Rome every year, and they would weave rose crowns, to place on the tombs of their ancestors and to crown one another's heads with. But this practice of weaving rose crowns in the springtime goes back, really, really far. So what seems to have happened was that people began in the Middle Ages about 1,000 years ago to recite the Hail Mary in Latin as a kind of a mantra, and they would say it over and
Mm,
over again. And this tradition developed that said that when you said the Hail Mary, you created a spiritual rose. And there are a lot of legends about roses actually coming out of the mouths of people when they prayed. And in many of the
wow.
legends, the Virgin Mary stands off to one side, usually invisible to the person who's actually doing it, but other people witness her plucking the roses out of the mouth of the person praying and weaving them into a crown for her own head. And so what ended up happening was that, people, priests, and, various, Catholic missionaries came into parts of Europe that were had very deep pagan roots going back thousands of years. And they taught them about the Virgin Mary, and they said, "Oh, yeah, we know who she is." And they taught them the Hail Mary, and they said, "Okay, that's a new prayer, but we know who she is." And so they merged this tradition of weaving these crowns of flowers with the tradition, the mantric tradition of saying these prayers. And that's really where the rosary comes from. It's a mashup of a very ancient pagan practice, with a somewhat newer mantric practice.
I'll just add something about that mantra that uh, it's really interesting to know is that you were talking earlier about these feminine traditions, and instead of these scriptural traditions of the literate priesthood, right? You have a mostly illiterate populace who have these folk tales and folk traditions they've been doing for thousands of years in devotion to the Great Mother. And they take this prayer that comes from the Gospels, which is the words that the angel Gabriel speaks to Mary, Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. And they turn it into a prayer to the triple goddess.
The triple goddess.
Yes, the
Do
triple goddess
tell.
the triple goddess is the maiden, the mother, and the crone. And we see
Mm,
her in the moon, right? The maiden
yes.
is the waxing moon. And then there's the full moon, who's the mother, and then we have the dark moon, who's the crone, who's the kate, you know. And we're going through this cycle of the triple goddess. You sometimes see her maiden, mother, and crone in old imagery, right? Well, the Hail Mary prayer is Hail Mary, Hail Maiden, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Now that sounds like a very Catholic prayer, but what you're
Yes.
really praying for is like one of those Tibetan yab yum pictures. Have you ever seen them of the god and goddess making love to
Yes.
kind of create the universe? That's what you're praying about.
Yeah.
Lord and Lady together, sun and moon coming together to create life.
Yeah.
And that's the maiden. And then Hail Maiden, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, or blessed art thou among mothers, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb. And that's all of life. You're
That's right.
praying to the cosmos. Holy Mary, Mother of all, pray for us now and at the hour of our death. You're praying to the crone, the dark mother, Hecate, the mother who takes us back into her body at the end of our lives. So this prayer did not come from the priests or the on high. It came from people who'd been devoted for generations to the triple goddess. And they began, so they couched it all in this pious seeming language, but it's a really old devotional practice and prayer, really radical.
And it really makes perfect sense for the times, because it feels like, oh, you are in line with the powers that be, the church, and at the same time, you're working something that feels good in your heart, that feels old and natural to
Well,
you.
a lot of these old women, in the days before Vatican II, the church, the church service was in Latin, right? And the priests would be up there doing their shtick, right? And the old women would be in the back of the church with their beads, and they'd be doing their magic. So there was this show going up on here, and then in the back of the pew were the magic workers.
Indeed.
Then the church got wind of that and decided to shut it down with Vatican II.
Yeah.
Wow. No rosary practice whatsoever. But it does it. I mean, I went through a period where I practiced the rosary, and was a good Catholic for some of my adult life, not a childhood Catholic. And it does, it emanates a vibration that is very strong in you and seems to go out to those around you, to fill a house or fill a room or a church.
There was a study that was done, I want to say around 20 years ago, as they developed modern brain imaging techniques and various ways of measuring the, ebbs and flows of consciousness, different types of brain waves, brain blood chemistry and things like that. People began to get curious about what was happening in the body and the mind of people doing deep meditation. So there was a tremendous Asian bias in these days, like this idea that, like Tibetan monks or Japanese Zen monks, right? These people have sort of monopolized, the quote, spiritual technologies of Buddhism or Hinduism. And so they went and they tested the brain waves, right? The brain functioning of Tibetan monks doing deep sort of mantra style meditation. And they discovered that there were remarkable changes taking places in their brains. Now, about 10 or 15 years passed, and somebody in Italy said, that's kind of interesting. It kind of reminds me of my grandma saying the rosary at the back of the church. So they said, I wonder what would happen if we hooked up Grandma and her friends to these devices, which they did. And the results were identical, right? So
Wow.
you have this one practice that's very esoteric and is practiced by monastics, like literally secreted away in inaccessible areas of Nepal, right?
Mhm.
And then you have these other people who are just sitting there saying their prayers at the back of a church, these old women,
Or while they're making pasta.
or while they're making pasta or whatever, where there's no particular spiritual technology involved, but the rhythms of the prayer. What they found was that the rhythms of both of these types of prayers toned the vagus nerve and brought
Mm.
the body and the mind into a deeper place of harmony. A very famous study written about this, comparing these two different styles of meditation.
Wow. And the vagus nerve therapy is such a hot item these days. And
Yeah.
they're doing all kinds of intense exercises and massages and people are doing workshops and getting treatments, and all they have to do is get a rosary.
Yeah, that's right.
The other thing is, I wrote a book with a psychic once, and I've gotten to make friends with a lot of people who are pretty incredible psychics. And it's amazing how many psychics pray the rosary because they also experience it as thinning the veil.
Yeah.
And that
It,
I think Jonathan Edwards, the famous psychic,
John Edwards.
John Edwards wrote
Yeah.
a book
yes.
about the rosary. A number of other have, and many psychics I know pray the rosary. And I find the rosary shifts you into a very liminal place. You really, that not awake, not asleep, in between place that's so powerful. Once
It is. I interrupt you. I want you to hold that thought. I wanted to say hi to Martha Morell. Says, so love this. Some people are just on the radio and they can't see what's on there.
Yeah.
But please go ahead.
So we have a lot of in-person rosary circles. We help support rosary circles all over the world. We have them on Zoom and on telephone, and we also have in-person circles. And once we were at our local Woodstock circle, about 9 people were there, and a newcomer arrived. She'd never prayed the rosary before. And we were all sitting in a circle praying the rosary together. And we got to the third mystery, about the middle of the rosary. And the newcomer watched as every one of the 9 people in the room fell asleep at the same moment. And she didn't know what to do. She'd never seen anything like this. Everyone was asleep. And then she just kind of stood there sort of quietly saying her prayers. And about a minute later, we all emerged and woke up at the same moment back into our prayers and continued.
Right.
It's as if
Wow.
we had traveled.
Yeah.
I mean, the mysteries of the rosary are connected to the Eleusinian mysteries, the mystery cults of the Mediterranean. And that practice brings you into really deep, powerful states of being.
The rosary really opens a kind of portal. And, it's that area that lies between, dreaming and waking thought. Someone at one of our meetings asked a question recently. They said, and this is very common. You hear this all the time. People laugh when they hear it at a meeting because it's such a common experience. People say, I've been falling asleep when I pray the rosary. I don't know what's wrong. And then somebody will usually say, well, if you're not falling asleep when you pray the rosary every now and then, you may be doing it wrong.
Well, exactly. I do a lot of activations where I activate and connect with various energies like Venus or deep places within the earth or Yeshua, et cetera, et cetera. And consistently, I fall asleep for a couple of minutes, and I come back supercharged with the energy as if I've been doing it all along, which I always see it as my brain getting out of the way.
Yeah.
Exactly, Bart. Exactly. In fact, Clark and I sometimes, we're writers, and sometimes we'll say, I'm a little stuck. I think I'm going to go take a rosary nap and see if I can unstick myself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yes. That's just so amazing. It's always been interesting to see your spiritual processes. As I read your books, Waking Up to the Dark by Clark and Taking Back the Magic by Perdita and of course The Way of the Rose by both of you. And it's not a flashy practice. It's very
No.
common, normal people that are nice Buddhists living out in the country. You think about it, as ordinary as it gets. However, there's so much power, and it seems like there's so many stories where things just show up at the right time for you guys.
Right.
Like boom, but you're ordinary people. It's like, well, we're not
Yeah.
asking for much, but whatever we seems to be necessary, just boom, it's there.
Yeah.
Ah,
Well, prayer works.
Prayer works.
Prayer really does work.
But here's the thing, the prayer in a monetary economy is, please may I win the lottery, right?
mhm.
And money becomes the substitute for divine relationship. But in a prayer economy, you don't win the lottery, but you get into relationship and intimacy with those on the other side and find yourself with more than you ever imagined, right? You
Right.
find your
Yes.
heart being satisfied and your life. I mean, I know you live your life this way, Bart, I can tell you do. Which is, you don't necessarily get more than you need, but you get what your heart needs and what your heart wants.
Yeah.
And you get shown the way, you
Yeah.
get cared for.
Yeah. Yeah. I never pray for money or a car.
I've prayed for a car. I just got to put that out there. I have definitely prayed for a car, and I got one. So
you can pray for anything,
Yeah. But if you get more conscious, you'll manifest all of that stuff up because your
Yeah.
vibration is so much bigger,
Yeah.
and it seems to just come in.
exactly.
I spent a lot of time studying a Japanese Buddhist group that chants Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. They're Nichiren Buddhists, and they famously chant for money, cars, all kinds of things like that. And I was told a really wonderful story that really stuck with me years ago when that particular form of Buddhism first came to America in the 1960s. There were these Japanese war brides, right, who'd married servicemen who came back to California, and they were they were real believers, in this form of prayer. And so they would sort of go out in the street and they would say, "You come, chant, be happy," right? And they would just invite these hippies like right off the street. And they would go to a meeting, they would chant, and these women would say, "Oh, you can chant for anything you want to." And one of these hippies at a meeting somebody told me about sort of threw down the gauntlet like a dare and said, "Well, can I chant for sex and drugs?" And without missing a beat, this old Japanese lady said, "Oh yes, chant sex, drugs. You get them too." And the idea was that it really kind of didn't matter where you started the path of prayer, because once you were on it, you would discover that there were all kinds of things you needed for happiness and for health,
Mm.
right? And to have and to feel contentment and fulfillment in your life. And so they would end up very quickly praying for other things. Well, actually, my brother's sick. I'd really love for him to find a good doctor. And I hate the job I'm in. I'd really like a better job, right? And so they begin to pray.
And I do want sex, but I also want a relationship.
Yeah. That'd be
It might be
nice.
nice to have somebody I like having sex with.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and then there's just the process of it that just
Yeah.
feels darn good to do these things, and to me that's what keeps filling me up. It's and I was just thinking about this today about desire. In a couple of things that are happening, I'm relating with people in my personal life, and they're not working, and I'm going, well, what's my problem? And I'm going, oh, you're desiring something from these people to be a certain way. And it's like, okay, so I just really need to fill myself up with another energy so I'm not so wrapped up in that desire and let go of the outcome.
Yeah.
And it
You
just
know, I,
happens.
I think there might be a word. Here's the thing, because I kind of like desire as a word. I mean, it's a
Hmm.
wonderful word, and we encourage people in the Way of the Rose to pray for their heart's desire.
Ah, yes.
And I think that there's craving, right? And we as modern people have a kind of unfillable, hungry ghost hole of craving we sometimes have. But then there are those things in our heart that our heart wants. And when we begin to follow those, and what do people really want in their hearts? Most of the time they want intimacy and love. I'll never forget my two children they're grown-ups, and they were having some dreadful squabble in the living room where they were saying all kinds of dreadful things to each other, and it was they're wonderfully evolved people, of course, but they were behaving like 3-year-olds, and it was spiraling out of control. And I stepped in and I said, all right, stop for a minute. What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And my son said, I want Sophie to like me. And I said, Sophie, what do you want? She said, I want Jonah to like me. And I said, okay, let's just sit with that for a minute. What do we want?
It gets. Yeah. Well, I so agree. It's sometimes it gets so simple, but we make it so complex.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things we've discovered in our Rosary Fellowship, and I think it's really old wisdom, that goes back to the beginning for human beings and how they once lived together. But what's happened is that the desires of the heart, right, our heart's desires, have been displaced by a civilization that tells us what to desire, what it wants us to desire, and then offers us, this sort of endless series of carrots and sticks sort of guiding us along its path for happiness and success. When in fact, the only real defense we have against the ills of civilization is our heart's desires. So what keeps us centered within ourselves, and our own, the wholesomeness of our own immediate experience. And when we learn to pray for what we truly want, what will truly fulfill us and make ourselves happy, it usually turns out to be something fairly simple and often accessible, as opposed to the programs for happiness, which are endlessly being forced upon us from without. The only defense against those is to find out what we want.
Yeah, it's kind of like a light show when people go, well, I just want a better car and a better relationship.
Yeah.
And it's all of these things. Whereas being in that centered, you really see something much more magical. And I got to stop the show to give the call letters that you are on Becoming Quantum Conscious. And I am Bart Sharp, and our guest today is Clark Strand and Perdita Finn, authors of this wonderful book called The Way of the Rose. And they are also authors of Taking Back the Magic and Waking Up to the Dark. Both of them are wonderful books as well. And you are on United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 105.3. And we're also on Roku, cable television, the UPRN website, Facebook, YouTube, X, the formerly known as Twitter. I keep Twitter is how far behind I am, or maybe I'm just trying to avoid Elon Musk. I'm not for sure. But basically, we're all over the world interviewing all of these wonderful people, and these are two of my favorite interviewed people. As they've been on the show before, but not as a husband wife team, as they wrote The Way of the Rose together. And it's such a great book because one chapter will be Clark's, one chapter will be Perdita's, and they just take you on this journey kind of together, but yet different. And it's different than just about any book I read before because it has consistency and flow, but yet it has 2 points of view and 2 perspectives. And I just wanted to ask the question, what was it like for y'all to write this together?
Well, first let me say the nice part. The Rosary itself, I think the Rosary is about the alchemical marriage. And, the sun and moon, light and dark, male and female.
Yeah, it's got male prayers, the Our Father, and female prayers,
the Hail
Ave.
Mary. Of course, it's Claire who's in charge, which is the Hail Mary. So it's just
it's a 10-to-1 ratio. So yeah.
But it is, it is this alchemical idea going back to that yab yam idea of, you see in Tibetan Buddhism is of just this bringing all those energies together and weaving male and female together. So we knew as a couple that we wanted to do that in this book, and that we both had different ways of sort of saying things and writing about things. And Clark and I, we've been married now, we've been together 32 years. And I don't think we've ever stopped talking in 32 years. And,
when we sleep, but that's about it.
Maybe. I think we talk in our dreams.
Well, you don't always sleep. You go out and walk in the dark.
Well,
So.
I do. That's true.
And so, yeah, so we knew from the beginning we were going to write the book together. But please don't have any romantic ideas about what that looks like.
Boy. So you have two professional writers, all right, who've helped one another for years with their books, right? I would help Perdita with her books. She would help me with mine. And suddenly we're writing a book together, because the only book on the Rosary you can really write is a book written by a man and a woman, right? Because it does have these two energies. And if you have a male author, the male perspective is going to dominate. If you have a woman, the woman's perspective is going to dominate. So we had to write together. But boy, let me tell you, here's the typical. When we were writing the chapters for this book, there are 59 chapters, just like the 59 beads of a rosary, right? And so with each of these chapters, we would write something. One of us would show it to the other, and the other would say, "Oh, that's crap. That's terrible. That's no good. What are you talking about?" And then the other person would say, "Well, then you fix it." And that person would then try to fix it, and the other person would say, "Oh, that's even worse." And we would fight like this, back and forth.
At one point, one of our children came in and they said, "Stop fighting." I said, "We can't. If we stop fighting, we're going to stop writing."
Yeah, we have to do this. So, and then finally, we would get kind of close, and then we would just it was like we'd be fuming with one another. We both have such strong opinions about what it should look like. And then there would be this long silence of sometimes 5, 10, 15 minutes. And then one of us, it could be either one, would say, "I got an idea. I think I know how to land it." And then that person would sit down at the computer and type it, and the other person would say, "Oh yeah, that's it. That's it. Great. That was done.
Okay, good."
On to the next.
It was like watching one of those, Animal Planet shows about, animals attacking each other.
Yeah, it was really intense. But the net result was that we brought these two, energies together, and there was, they sparked. They created, real energy in the book.
We're both very strong, opinionated personalities, and so it was definitely flint and steel. We're working on another book.
I'm the steel.
We're working on another book together, Bart, and part of us just can't bring ourselves to sit down and start really working on it seriously because it's so intense.
We're very happy with the result, though. We're very proud of it.
It takes a certain emotion to complete a book. Sometimes I had to get really angry to complete a lot of the chapters because I write. And I had a really obnoxious roommate. I was going to go to France, had a roommate move into my house with my other roommate. I'm ready to leave. And then nobody can travel due to this was in 2020. And so I'm stuck with this roommate I found out I really didn't like. And what can I do but write a book? And, all my anger towards this guy gets converted to this thing. He was a very dishonest person that really miffed me. But I just realized how much we use certain emotions to push us to do something, because writing is not easy.
No, it's not.
No.
People have a lot of fantasies about, some of the chapters in Way of the Rose were rewritten 20, 30 times.
Yeah.
And because we were trying to say things, we knew we wanted to say things very simply and accessibly, but we were trying to say things that were also very profound, and that's hard to do.
Yeah.
And it flows. I mean, both of your writing flows so well of a very practical story. So that to me is surprising, because it sounds almost as if somebody's speaking it sometimes. You're both great storytellers.
Yeah.
I remember when I first met Clark Bart. He's from down south. He's from, he grew up in Alabama and Georgia. And I realized I was entering a culture where storytelling was like jazz. You know what I mean? Like when Clark and his extended family members get together, it's like, some of them are like Mark Twain. And one person tells a story and another person tells a story, and it's improv, and I was in heaven. I mean, I come from an Irish storytelling tradition,
Uh-huh.
and I
It's
think
only because she was hearing them for the first time that she was in heaven.
30 years later, I've heard some of them too many times. But but our daughter is also both of our children are storytellers too, and we love storytelling culture. And one of the ways that the Rosary was passed around to people and became so popular was that the most popular stories in the Middle Ages were stories that of the Virgin's miracles.
Yeah.
Miracle stories. And they're funny and they're amazing and they're the action movies of their day, and they're
popular entertainment.
These miracle stories. And that we include a lot of these medieval miracle stories in Way of the Rose because we love them so much.
Yeah.
And we've developed our own culture in Way of the Rose. We have a lot of miracle stories in our community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the end of every meeting, we ask people to share miracles that they've experienced, and there are always at least one or two at the end of every meeting.
Oh, that's wonderful! Wow. And on your Facebook group, The Way of the Rose. So if you're on Facebook, check out The Way of the Rose. But also, I want to say that if you want to check out Clark and Perdita, Perdita has a website, perditafin.com. I can't remember if you have a website, Clark.
I teach haiku poetry professionally, and so I'm easy to reach on Instagram and Facebook. Just I'm under my own name, so that's
under orders to get a Facebook to get a website.
Yeah. Yeah, and so The Way of the Rose, the Facebook group, which I check into, just has so many wonderful stories of these sharing of their convictions of spirituality.
Yeah.
And also, I just wanted to say that, and I should have said this a long time ago, those who are listening in, you're welcome to join into the chat and ask Clark and Perdita questions. Please do so. We talk fast, though, so it's, we will read the chat and put it up if you
I just want to say, Bart, that we also have a very active website called wayoftherose.org, where you can find out about meetings, about our fellowship, read messages from Our Lady of Woodstock, and learn a lot about the Rosary.
Yeah, we have the website is very rich. We've worked on it for almost a decade now, and we offer up to 12 circles a day. They're all for free. Everything to do with Way of the Rose is for free, and we offer Rosary circles on Zoom and by phone and in person. And there's a calendar which lists all those, and everyone is welcome to come to any circle.
Yeah.
And you don't have to pray the Rosary before. We have people show up who have never prayed the Rosary, don't have a Rosary. You got 10 fingers, and by the end of the circle, you'll know how to pray the Rosary.
Yeah, it's really
okay. It's so true. Well, I go to this church in France called Notre Dame de Celles, and this is one of the apparition locations where Mother Mary comes and meets this young man named Jean, who's farming out in the woods. She blesses the spring where he's nearby, and all of a sudden his hoe has all of these great engravings on it that weren't there before. I've never seen the hoe, but I've stood on the rock and I've drink the water regularly. I was there today, as a matter of fact, and it's very high vibrational water.
Wow.
But in the church, people sell their used rosaries and new rosaries and talk about highly charged rosaries.
Yeah.
Rosaries
hold all kinds of vibrations.
Yeah.
They do. I have two different rosaries I pray with, Bart. I pray with a lot of rosaries, but two. One I have with a Mary Magdalene medal on it. I pray with it. One day will go to my daughter, and one with a St. Anthony medal that will one day go to my son. And people have inherited their grandmother's rosaries, and you're not just inheriting an object, you're inheriting that prayer. I mean, these are magical objects. When you hold, I mean, I don't have to tell you this, but the beads hold the prayer, and the words of the prayers hold that magic through the generations. And I sometimes, when I hold a rosary in my hand, I feel like I'm holding a handful of magic beans. And they take you right to heaven.
It's beyond the personality of the person, because
Oh,
your Aunt Edith may be, a super control freak on one level because you're their child or their niece or nephew, but at the same time, they're highly spiritual persons. One thing that you say in your preference is that and I never realized that, but it's in the shape of the Egyptian Ankh. Did I get that right?
You did. It is. The rosary is an ankh.
Yeah.
The symbol for woman.
Yeah. If you take a rosary and, a standard rosary with a circle, a pendant, and a cross at the end, and you spread it out so that the beads form a circle, then you'll find that it's basically the symbol for woman, for Venus, and also the Egyptian Ankh, right?
And you even see Isis holding that symbol, right? Like a rosary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when I won't balance, I look at an Ankh, and as soon as I look at it, I'm balanced.
Yeah.
If I'm working with people, because I do shamanic work, and it almost like holds a place. I'll look at it, always have it against the wall so I can glance at it, and it pulls me into almost like a magic space where I'm very present and clear with that person.
Yeah. That
And it
makes
just
sense.
happens instantly.
Well, it's the womb. What you're really holding is the womb, and you're holding that fertile, creative, gestational place where we really can become who we already are.
Our daughter Sophie says that once said that the rosary was a stowaway hidden in the hull of the Catholic Church that was that was passed down through the centuries, right? A stowaway, like a church within a church, as it were, and devoted to the goddess that was hidden in this devotion. And that's really what happened, as toward the end of the Middle Ages, as the Reformation came in and began to, sort of mount its anti-Marian, anti-saint sort of crusade against Catholic magic and mysticism. Ordinary people hid all their treasures inside the rosary. They hid their mystery religions that had been passed down by their pagan ancestors from, Europe and the Mediterranean. They hid symbols like this circle with a cross, the sign of Venus, and the symbol of the Ankh. They hid secrets within the prayers and the way the prayers relate to one another. The Hail Mary and the Our Father are basically the joining of the male and female in a divine marriage, a hieros gamos. And so all of this they poured into the rosary and hid it there so that, it would be preserved. And it's, the result is it's been passed down to the present day by priests and popes who have no idea really what's inside of it.
Oh, how innocent they are.
Yes. I think one of the painful things is that, the rosary has in the modern, it's gotten associated with the anti-abortion movement, for instance, and it, which is terrible, that this feminist empowerment practice, and that was fairly deliberate. I think the attempt to take this goddess practice away from women was quite deliberate. And, we want to give it back to people. And we really do.
That's a great thought. And also, as you do it, you're parasympathetic, as you said, with your vagal nerve, but I always look at it, the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that calm nervous system that they say, well, it only operates when you're asleep and it's your involuntary organs. But as you two well know, because you practice it, it operates with the people who do a lot of meditation. And so when you drop into the parasympathetic, which is connected with the vagal nerve, you almost like your magical being starts to turn on. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
And people are trying to get this in a variety of ways, and yet this is a very easy practice.
Yeah, it is a very easy practice. Anybody can learn it. An 8-year-old with a diagram, and the text of the prayers can learn the rosary on their own, in an afternoon. I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah.
I mean, Martha asked in the questions about that. Yeah, you'll find a diagram, Martha, for praying the rosary on our website. There's a diagram in our book. It's sometimes hard to realize how easy the rosary is to pray.
Yeah.
It's so easy.
Yeah.
But we've been praying the rosary a long time, and every time I pray it, I discover new secrets. It's a bottomless well.
Yeah.
You can drink from it the first time, and the water will taste good.
And when you say a bottomless well, I'd like to take that as an analogy that it goes into the deepest part of your history of your genealogical embodiment.
Yeah.
In other words, when you were an Egyptian or Atlantean that were doing these types of things,
Bart, exactly.
It activates that.
Yeah.
There's so many people who will say, well, I've only been praying the rosary for a week and I feel like I've been praying it forever. And I want to go, I wonder how many past lifetimes you've had praying the rosary.
Right.
That it's so common for people to like pick it up and immediately feel at home.
Yeah. When I first started praying the rosary, because I wasn't raised with it, and I first started praying the rosary, I taught myself the prayers, and I think I said it for about a month before giving it up. And the reason I gave it up was I thought to myself, here I am saying these prayers on these beads like some old Catholic granny, okay? And I'm feeling like I'm getting into a space like that I used to never experience except maybe on the middle day of a 7-day silent retreat in a Zen monastery, right? And how is that happening? I thought it's got to be a placebo effect. I'm just talking myself into it, right? This can't be real. I literally stopped praying the rosary when I first learned it. I stopped praying it after a month because I was convinced I was tricking myself.
It was too easy.
It's too easy. I said, it can't be this easy. This doesn't make any sense.
Yes, and so the way of a rose is just talking to people about what this process is for you. Even though it is so simple, it's created a complexity of stories. Because, in the book, what I saw in general was Clark was telling a lot of personal stories of how he interacted and he saw this happening. And Perdita was telling a lot of the history and various things that she's seen in the world as consistent. And I thought that was an interesting way you guys approached it.
I'm going to tell you a secret, Bart.
Uh-oh.
We don't know who wrote what sentences. There are sections that look like Clark wrote them and I wrote them. There's sections of mine that look like I wrote them, Clark wrote them. So who knows?
Our model,
who knows?
Our model for the book were Albert and Frances Hackett.
I had a great aunt and uncle, Bart, who were famous Hollywood screenwriters. They did It's a Wonderful Life. And, a lot of the Thin Man movies. And they were famous for putting their typewriters together and typing as fast as they could, drinking martinis and yelling at each other.
Actually, maybe the martinis would have helped.
We skipped the martinis.
We don't drink, but we did yell.
Well, that's so amazing because I could just, it just felt like chapter to chapter, they changed so much with focus. And there was consistency in the book, but
who knows who wrote what?
It was always in that curiosity of like, well, who is this? Is this Parker Perdita's voice?
It is our story.
The 6 longer chapters in the book are written, in 3 of them in my voice and 3 in Perdita's. But I think a lot of the chapters you're talking about, the shorter chapters, which are, if you follow the design of the rosary, which is what we modeled the book after, those shorter chapters are like the Hail Mary chapters, and those are usually 2 or 3 pages long. Those chapters, there's no identifying voice, as me or Perdita.
Yes.
And the truth is, we worked on all of them together, but we each have our favorites, and we will argue. We will argue sometimes over whose chapter that really was. Like, oh, that was my chapter. I said, really? I look at this paragraph here, and that's not you.
And I think that we were, the experience when we finished it, Bart, and it was an incredible experience, was, oh, this is the work we were brought into this life to do together.
Yeah.
And I mean, yes, to raise our children, but I really felt like, oh boy, doing this is what we were supposed to do.
And I will tell you a short miracle, kind of a miracle. In the very beginning of the book, we referred to a statue in the first autobiographical chapter in the book, written by me. I tell a story of buying a medieval stone statue with the last money we had.
Oh,
and
yes,
bringing
yes,
it home,
yes.
and Perdita saying, "I send you off to with a cow, and you come back with magic beans."
He literally spent every penny we had.
Every penny we had on this statue. I brought it home, and we put it on our mantle. It's a medieval statue of the Virgin Mary. How she got to Woodstock, we have no idea. But anyway, that statue has been on our mantle above our fireplace since we first moved to Woodstock, and she really is kind of the centerpiece of our house and always has been. So
Wow.
she's the stone is sort of dark because it's very old, but not black, dark, dark gray. The very moment that Perdita and I turned to one another and said, the book is done, a votive candle that we had directly below this statue exploded. I mean, I want to say exploded, more like a Roman candle. It started pouring, belching black smoke out of the top, and it was flaming. It was like it was going to start shooting sparks into the sky. And when the smoke cleared, that statue, her face was black. She had become a black Madonna at that moment.
It was
an extraordinary experience. We still, it just.
I mean, I'm looking at her right now as I'm talking to you, and her face is as black as night.
Yeah.
And it was, it was her way of saying, "Yep, you're done.
You're done. That's
we did
it.
it."
Yeah.
But you say, who's the real author of the book? She's the real author of the book.
She really is.
And 10 of the chapters are her words directly.
Yeah.
And her words are directly.
Right. 10 of the chapters are entirely her words.
Well, I totally believe that with you guys after reading your books, that there's always something much bigger than your intellect going through this, but yet your years of writing experience.
Yeah. Well, we never would have
guide you away.
If it weren't for her. We would never presume to write a book on the Rosary.
Yeah, we just shut up. We're the court stenographers here.
We're coming to the show's close. So I want you to think about a 1-minute ending that you, as a message you'd like to give out to the audience. And I would like to say, before you give that you are becoming quantum conscious, and I am Bart Sharp. Next week's guest is going to be Marika Alvarado, Apache American Indian medicine woman, always entertaining and knowledgeable what she has to offer. She's amazing. But also you're on the United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network out of 107.7 and 105.3 out of New Orleans, Louisiana, on Roku, Facebook, UPR, and website, and a lot of other internet platforms. Anything else I forgot in that little spill? I guess we'll have to live without it. So what would you like to share with everybody?
I think that to awaken that deep consciousness that we've been all saying these prayers for a long time, I'd like to invite Clark to sing the medieval Ave Maria.
Oh, she's putting me on the spot.
I am. But he sings it beautifully and I don't. So
I
do sing it.
She loves to end interviews like this, so I'll do it. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Jesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. This is how they would have done it.
Wow, that was wonderful. And also, thank you, Karen Wren, for your lovely comment. That was lovely. You can feel the vibration just coming out there. Thank you so much, Clark Strand and Perdita Finn.
Thank
You
you,
can find
Bart.
these two lovely people, PerditaFinnPart.com, Way of the Rose on Facebook, or wayoftherose.org. Thanks for blessing us with your lovely expressions.
Oh,
Thank
Bart,
you,
thank
Bart.
you. And, next year in Paris, let's do this again in France. How about
Indeed.
that?
Indeed. I was in Paris. It was kind of, I was in
And,
actually Provence this past weekend and had a tremendous Mary Magdalene experience.
well, Bart,
But we'll
we've
save
never,
that for another story. Go ahead.
we've never been to St. Balm, and we've dreamt of going. So maybe we're meant to go with you at some point.
Indeed. I had a phenomenal experience there. I think the being that's there was in contact with the cosmos in a big way. It was amazing.
Can you tell us where we have to stop?
Let's just say that at that cave in St. Balm, as well as Maximilian St. Balm, the church, both of them had this big, deep communion cosmos, as if they were communing with Sophia. And it was activating all of these things in my brain and axis vertebrae, all of these places that seem to hold another greater reality of our oldest higher selves, is how I'd explain it. But yet they're kind of a limited, unused part of our brain. They seem to be getting activated. I was blown away. And
Well,
then I
if
went
you're
out.
there, just carry our love and our prayers to her, if you would.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Many
Bart.
blessings to y'all.
Many blessings
Bye-bye.
to you.
Hugs to
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.